Thanks for inviting us to the Global Healing Center here in Houston, Texas. Tell us your name and what your background is.
So my name is Dr. Edward Frank Group III. My background's in natural medicine. I'm also a chiropractor. And the mission that I'm here to accomplish is to really educate people on the root cause of disease, looking at all of the chemicals, all of the toxins that people are exposed to in the environment in which they live, whether it's the air they breathe, the water they drink, the food that they eat, and teach people how to reactivate their self-healing mechanism, what the most powerful medicine that they have inside of them, and the best way to do that to move forward so they can live a happy and healthy life.
How long have you been doing this work?
Been doing this 20 years now, 20 years.
Yeah.
So it's a mission to try to help as many people as I possibly can.
What got you interested in this subject?
What got me interested was watching my parents and my grandparents die of cancer. I mean, I lost both my parents to cancer in my early 20s. My dad was one of the chief chemists for Exxon. He was the developer of PVC plastics, and he was the inventor of Saran wrap. So he died when I was in my 20s because of throat cancer. And I really started looking at wanting to be in natural medicine. I met a guy that was doing natural cancer treatment and research, and he kind of got me into looking at the different alternatives to healthcare. And that kind of sparked my interest because I had gone through the whole medical allopathic model and I wasn't seeing any success. So I started looking outside that model, opening up my mind to different possibilities and opportunities, and really started looking at chiropractic as a method to where I could go get a doctorate degree and then focus more on doing research and finding out the root cause of cancer, the root cause of disease, and the different methods that were available dating back 2,000, 3,000 years of how physicians treated different types of illnesses and diseases throughout the years.
What kinds of things did you find through your research? I think you even said earlier when we were talking before we started the interview that you were doing some cancer research while you were still in school. What kind of things did you find that surprised you most?
What surprised me most was the suppression. When we started doing, when I was involved with a research team at MD Anderson in 1996, 1997, our job, that's when the big cancer hospitals around the United States were bringing in what they termed CAM, complementary alternative medicine. What they were doing was really hiring these and getting these research teams together to see what their competition might look like in the future. We didn't know that, of course. We wanted to just see, we thought it was really cool to go track down all these doctors that were working and using natural medicine and different herbs and different technologies, whether it was Rife technology or whether it was ozone technology or far infrared or detoxification and cleansing or herbal infusions, depending, there was always a big combination that these doctors were using. Mm-hmm. Our job was to find and gather all that research and bring it back. And when we did, we found out real fast that this is not what the allopathic medicine model wanted, that we were a threat to the pharmaceutical companies, and all that research was squashed. And so the biggest eye-opening thing for me, we thought we were bringing these natural methods that could cure every single disease known to man to America, and that these were going to be mainstream news, and that we wouldn't have cancer problems anymore, heart disease problems, diabetes problems, or any degenerative illness problems anymore. Now, what we found out was exactly the opposite. These cures are being suppressed. These cures are being suppressed from the media. They're being suppressed from the medical doctors, and they're being withheld. And not only that, there's campaigns designed to squash. The FDA is there to hunt down these natural practitioners. Mm-hmm. We found evidence of natural practitioners being killed. There's a big money-making opportunity in pharmaceutical medications and chemotherapy and radiation, especially trillion-dollar industry. So any threat to that industry, they will do anything in their power to prevent the general population from finding out this information.
Well, it's a hell of a way to launch a career, right? You get into it with this intention. You hook up with a very reputable, research facility and treatment facility. You're unleashed to go now study all this stuff and plug it into, an existing system that would be a distribution network for what you found. You find it, you come back, and it's all torched. It's buried. So, what did that do to you? How'd you feel about that?
Well, considering the fact that I had people following me around in black cars and I was being harassed, it actually kind of made me get to the point where I wanted to get this information out to the public. And right around that time was when the internet was coming online. I can remember the 28K modems at that time, and that was right around 1998, and it was AOL and Netscape, and I saw that as an opportunity for the future to be able to put some of this information online and start educating people. When people were typing in their different diseases, and the information technology age was just being born, and people were getting access to information where never before they would just go in and they would believe whatever their doctor said. The doctor was God, right? And so if you wanted to find somebody that knew about natural medicine, it was always usually through word of mouth, and you would have to go in this, find this person and go into this secret location and all this. So I was a rebel, get this information out. So we started our own degenerative disease clinic right around 1998, 1999, when we had finished all this research, and we wanted to help people. I mean, when you really have the true desire to help people, you face your enemy all the time because you're trying to change the world. You're trying to go against the big corporations, the petrochemical corporations, the vaccine industry, the agricultural industry. I mean, you have all of these pharmaceutical industry, these organizations that are working together, and the deeper that you get and the deeper that you find the root cause of disease being an accumulation of the chemicals produced by the agribusiness, the pharmaceuticals produced by the pharmaceutical, the petrochemicals produced by the oil and gas industry. All of these different things that are polluting the air and the food and the water and polluting the environment in which we live is what we identified as the root cause of practically every single degenerative disease. And when you do that, then the light goes off and you just want to share it with everybody, and you become excited, and you don't really care what they say about you. And you can be called a quack, and you can be called a witch doctor, and you can be called everything under the sun, but one thing speaks for itself, and that's results. When you start teaching people about this and how to recognize it and how to detoxify and cleanse their body and how to change their diet and how to drink pure, clean water and avoid all of the chemicals and toxins in their environment and in their life, then you're making a difference. And especially the gratifying moment of all that is when you see with your own eyes someone suffering from cancer, which is now a healthy individual, or suffering from heart disease or diabetes or arthritis or autoimmune problems. And when you actually can watch that transformation take place, and they're sitting there crying in your arms and saying thank you, and you're saying it wasn't me, it was you. You're the one that did all this, and you're the one that reactivated your body's self-healing mechanism. You need to take the credit for this because you changed your life. You have become a healthy person now.
That's awesome. That's gotta be, you can never get tired of that experience, can you?
No.
Never gets old.
It's great.
So now, through your career, enter into the scene this new phenomenon of GMOs. Maybe let's start from the beginning. How do you view GMOs when they first came out? And you used a phrase I'd never heard before, GMOs 2.0. So I'd love for you to speak about that too.
Right. So one of the things that we've identified over the last 20 years is the damaging effects of foods in the intestinal lining, because we know that no matter what disease someone is suffering from, it's an accumulation of chemicals in the body. Well, you have to take a step back. How are those damaging things getting into the body? Well, we breathe a tiny, tiny amount of chemicals and toxins through our respiratory system, and very small amount get absorbed in the blood because of our mucous membranes and everything else. Well, the mucous membranes lead back down into the stomach. So when we started looking and evaluating the levels of the chemicals and toxins that are coming into the body that are the cause of these diseases that are developing, we had to look at the food supply. And when we looked at the food supply, with the amount of research that we've been accumulating over the years, you have the genetically modified organisms, genetically modified foods, which means you're taking something natural and you're introducing a genetic material from another species, whether it's an animal or another plant, into the DNA of something else. Right there alone should be huge alarms going off all over the world. Mm-hmm. But when you have a government that's corrupt, a USDA that's corrupt, an FDA that's corrupt, that's run by Monsanto ex-employees and Syngenta and DuPont and all of these chemical corporations that were originally designed to be chemical corporations but now are getting into wanting to own the soil and the seeds of the planet and patenting these seeds, and then not only owning that, but owning the pesticide, herbicide, insecticide business as well. You have to look at, we have three things that we depend on. We have to breathe clean air, okay? There's no other companies that I can think of that are doing more damage to the world today than these companies like Monsanto and Dow and Syngenta and BASF and these companies that are altering our soil, and that's running off into our water supplies. So it's poisoning the water, it's poisoning the soil of the earth, and it's poisoning the air of the earth. What do we need to survive? We need clean water, we need clean food, and we need clean air. And these companies are contaminating all three of those processes. So it's not just about eating genetically modified foods, it's also the damage that's being done because of the chemicals being sprayed on the genetically modified crops and everything else. Now, what we have learned, and all of the people that have come forward and everything that we've been fighting against for years and years and years, we know genetically modified foods. We have proof now that glyphosate, atrazine, some of the herbicides, as well as the genetically modified foods that have been created in the past, cause damage to the bowel, cause damage to the body, cause damage to the immune system, because we know now that all organ systems in your body are controlled from the gut. And so, it makes you wonder, if you want to wipe out a population, or if you want to create illness across the globe, globally, what is the first place that you attack? You attack the gut of every single individual. We know that the lymphatic system is directly related to the gut. We know the brain-gut connection now. We know the appendix now controls every single system in the body, or there's a connection between that. So it's almost scary if you think was there some planning behind this? Because they know, or do they know, that if they disrupt and damage the gut, that they're ultimately going to create massive amounts of disease and sickness in the population all over the world.
So when they come back and say, but people are starving and we need to increase crop yields, et cetera, how do you respond to that?
There's never been any crop yields. I mean, it was all a marketing ploy. It's proven fact that sustainable growing technologies are going to produce better food and more crops. There's enough food on this planet to feed everybody on the planet 1.5 times over at any given time.
So we don't have a food production issue, we have a food distribution issue.
We have a food distribution issue, and that's also being controlled by big corporations. I mean, what we have is the main cause. If you want to look at the root cause of disease and you want to take it even a step farther from people eating and being exposed to all these chemicals, then you start looking at who is producing these chemicals,
right,
who is approving these chemicals. It's very easy to write an executive order, let's say, and say we want to ban genetically modified foods. Let's write an executive order and ban glyphosate. That's the kind of letters that I'm writing to the government and saying, listen, let's address the root cause. this healthcare program that you have is still not addressing the root cause of the problem.
Right.
So not only do you have the damaging effects of the genetically modified foods that people are eating in the corn supply, the soybeans that are being produced, which are also estrogen mimickers and creating hormonal disruptions. You have massive allergies that are happening right now with children because of the genetically modified foods. We never had allergies. I mean, I had one kid when I was growing up in school that had allergies. Now you have like over 90% of the children that have multiple allergies because the formulas, the baby formulas that are high in GMO residue and herbicide residue. You have all of the different types of corn. You have wheat byproducts and hybrids now that are coming onto the market. You have zucchini, you have cottonseed oil, you have canola seed oil. You have all of these different things that are going to be introduced with 90% of the processed foods that people are buying today that have traces of genetically modified organisms or traces or massive amounts of glyphosate or atrazine. Atrazine is Syngenta's big herbicide. Roundup, glyphosate, is Monsanto's big herbicide, which is contaminating even organic farms right now. Mm-hmm. So yes, GMOs are causing a major problem. And when we talk about the health consequences, and you look at cancer, you look at reproductive problems right now, the tests that have been done on genetically modified foods that show the third generation of rats are infertile. We never had fertility clinics on the corner, every single corner. I didn't even know what a fertility clinic was 10 years ago. Now we have massive fertility clinics everywhere across the United States.
With these rat studies that you just cited, are you talking about the impact of the GMO in and of itself or the GMO and the toxins that are sprayed on it?
Well, I think it's a combination of both and individually really because Syngenta, Monsanto, some of these agri companies are very strict about releasing any of their seeds for independent scientists to do research on. So it's very hard to get a hold of these things, and then the independent scientists that do studies on it end up getting attacked, and they end up losing their jobs over it and everything else. So I think that number one, if you take just glyphosate and atrazine, for example, atrazine, one of the top endocrine disrupting chemicals out there, if you start looking at the reproductive, the infertility, I think that not only it's hard to say when you combine so many chemicals together what's really going to be happening, right? So let's say that you are eating genetically modified foods that are sprayed with glyphosate. You could take the glyphosate and do an independent study on the rats with just glyphosate, and I guarantee you're going to find all kinds of problems. You could take genetically modified corn with the Bt toxin and do independent studies on rice, or even without the Bt toxin. And you're still going to find problems with the mice or the animals. The animal industry is completely turned upside down because of the genetically modified foods that they're being fed.
So it steps up. So it's a one direct feeding, but then it's feeding what we're eating.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
can talk to people at meat processing plants that cut open pigs and cattle that have been fed genetically modified foods, and they'll tell you they know that animal was fed genetically modified foods because of the color of the meat is different and the smell is putrid because of some of the genes that cause that putridity to happen with GMO foods. But the big question is, who's doing scientific research on mixing glyphosate with aluminum, with toxic cleaning products, with VOCs, with pesticide residue, other pesticide residue, and all the other chemicals and toxins that we're breathing in and drinking in, and high fructose corn syrup and all of the other things.
Well, this is a really good point, because it's one thing to say we'll study any of those things on the list you just made individually, but that's not the same thing as what we're experiencing in the environment collectively. You start, because what happens is you start putting these things together and there's emerging properties that cannot be identified from the individual elements. So that's got to be a very significant thing, because as you just posed the question, who's looking at that? And the answer is, I don't know of anybody. Do you?
No, I mean, and everybody's environment is different. Let's say you have highly contaminated water supplies in the United States and around the world. And I say United States because the United States uses the most pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and all that. We're talking about just glyphosate or atrazine, but there's hundreds of other fungicides and all kinds of other chemicals that are running off into the water supply. Not only the hundreds of herbicides, insecticides that are being used on the fields, but then combine the fluoride in the water, the chlorine in the water, the prescription drug residue in the water, all of the hormones that are being put in the water, and then you have this big slew, like a witch's brew, of all these chemicals and pesticides, insecticides, and chemicals that are going into the tap water. Then you have a hexavalent chromium coming in there, and you have all these things that are reactive, and a lot of times those cannot even be filtered out. And these all affect you and affect the environment and affect your systems in your body, and everybody is different. So yes, I mean, these are major chemicals that are being sprayed on the food supply, but the grand picture of everything is how many chemicals with those combined are you consuming on a daily basis?
And the answer is too many.
Too many, too many.
So as if that wasn't bad enough then, as far as looking at GMOs, genetically modifying food, which just intuitively says, that should be really, really well tested before we even think about, opening it up to the world, which hasn't been done. And secondly, compound it with all the toxins, et cetera, and we lead to this situation where you started out saying, my whole purpose in life is to help people with especially these very debilitating and chronic diseases, yet we're manufacturing them literally through the big corporate interests who also get to buy political interests, and next thing you know, we're sitting with a logarithmic rise of these diseases in the world and in humanity. And what drove you is the fact that your own parents who had succumbed to cancer and a chronic disease, and then now you see this expanding. I mean, it's actually like there's not been an outrage that said we have to trim this back. So now after 20 years, you seem still very energized by your purpose. What does it feel like now compared to where you started, and what do you feel like your cause is now?
Well, I mean, last I checked, Monsanto had 18 lobbying groups that they were paying millions and millions of dollars to, and it all starts in the political arena. But I have noticed progress, and that's the good news. The good news is because of the internet, because we dedicate our lives to getting this information out there so people can do their own research and make their own decisions in their life. We have the Non-GMO Project. We have March Against Monsanto. We have all the GMO documentaries, the anti-GMO books that are coming out, all of the YouTube videos on anti-GMOs. It's not so much behind the scenes anymore. So I think that the consumers are the one. Obviously, we're not going to make progress in politics, or it takes years and years and years to make progress in politics. I always say it's we, the people, that are the ones that create the fastest change. And if you look back 10, 15, 20 years ago, we've made a significant change. You have General Mills now making changes. You have big corporations, big giant corporations that are going GMO free or coming out with lines of GMO free foods. So that's not because politics, and that's not because the senators and congressmen and everything said say no to GMO.
Right.
That's because we are understanding what it's doing to our bodies, and we're consciously making that effort to not buy products that contain GMOs. So that's the exciting part.
Right.
Years ago, you would have to wait years and years and years to see a little bit of change, but I think that we're almost at that tipping point right now where we're actually starting to see the change take place. And that's what keeps me going, and that's what's exciting to know that there's more organic farmers. All the farmers that in India that have committed suicide over GMO crops out there, all the farmers that Monsanto has sued because they're utilizing their seed, and all the farmers that are turning and saying, wait a second, this is not working for me, let's start doing organic growing, and the demand for organic growing is what that first and second and third stage of excitement is leading to.
Now from here, we go to GMO 2.0. What is that?
So all of the big seed companies, and by the way, the Seed Vault, which is one of the most heavily guarded areas in the world, which is owned by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, DuPont, Monsanto, all of them have a stake in that. So the grand design was to take over all of the seeds of the planet to where everybody was relying on them for their food. The scary thing that's been happening now is they've realized that there's a movement against GMOs. So what I call the next movement, what's happening right now, is GMO 2.0. And GMO 2.0 are these companies focusing on new technology, new genetic engineering, which is two different distinct things: gene editing and gene silencing. Now this is a touchy situation because the USDA and the FDA are actually on board with this, because they're saying you don't have to actually label it as a GMO because you're not introducing genetic material from another species into the organism. So this is what you're going to see in the future of genetically engineered plants.
So just to be clear, by some legal definition, it's not a GMO, but they're genetically modifying and genetically engineering here. So that's kind of a dicey thing. And is this a way that you're saying that they can circumvent even being a non-GMO, that they could say they're non-GMO when they really are?
As a matter of fact, the U.S. Organics, National Organic Program, is thinking right now about rewriting the rules on genetically modified organisms and allowing these genetically engineered foods into the National Organic Program. It's that scary. So you have gene editing and gene silencing. Well, the gene silencing is already in production and in grocery stores right now. The gene silencing is based on RNA interference. So what that is you're silencing a gene in that produce. For example, the Arctic apple, which the USDA and the FDA approved for sale and is actually in sale right now in different parts of the United States, which we don't know where, unfortunately, that keeps an apple from turning brown. So what they do is they go in and they suppress the gene that creates the oxidation to prevent the apple from turning brown.
And that's by interfering with the messenger RNA, basically, so that it doesn't trigger and it doesn't turn on and let it turn brown. So now,
it's gene silencing. So they're silencing the gene through RNA interference. They're basically cutting it off so the apple doesn't turn brown anymore.
and we know that, I think it was Aristotle that said that nature does nothing uselessly, right? So if the whole genetic evolution, what is communicated, what genes are turned on and turned off based on environmental cues, to get rid of that, and to think that you could do that without consequence is kind of really arrogant, isn't it?
To me, it's playing God.
Yeah.
You're taking something that was created a specific way. There's a reason why the apple oxidizes very rapidly. Same thing happened with the innate potato. So that's another produce that's in stores right now that went through the gene silencing program and was approved by the USDA and the FDA with no safety studies, rushed through, and people are eating it right now. So you have the potato and the apple, and there's over 385 synthetic biology projects going on right now. They call it synthetic biology. There's actually procedures in place now where you can synthesize DNA from a computer and use that for gene alterations as well. So the way they're getting around this whole genetically modified organisms are, all the laws have been written on genetically modified organisms being able to insert a gene from another plant species. But this isn't inserting a gene from another plant species. This is manipulating a gene, turning it off, or through gene sequencing or gene engineering, or through gene editing, which was developed by the Broad Institute in Boston, one of the top genetic research companies. And gene editing is like a Word document, and you go in and you actually edit it, but this is with DNA and with genes. So they have what's called CRISPR technology or TALEN technology or zinc finger nuclease technology, to where they're able to actually go in and edit the genes to create or to alter the expression of those genes. So it's not silencing the gene, it's actually editing the gene.
Have there been any research studies done around this new technology?
As a matter of fact, the Columbia University Medical Center just came out with a study on this CRISPR technology, this gene editing technology, and they found hundreds of mutations that can happen using this technology. So we have a serious problem on our hands right now, especially in the United States and around the world, because this is the direction these companies are going. They're utilizing this new gene engineering technology to alter the same genetic code, the same DNA in the plant, and our government is not doing anything about it because the government says the genetics have not been modified with another species. It's just those individual genes are being engineered and changed. Now that's scary when these things can just go right through the FDA approval process, right through the USDA approval process, with no safety studies on how they're going to affect the environment and how they're going to affect us as individuals. If you eat a genetically engineered produce and that gene, which has been designed to either turn off or has been altered, what do they think is going to happen in your body? You're going to break it down, and your body uses plant DNA and plant genes to function. You could be potentially changing your genes, changing your DNA, and you could become a hybrid.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe it has to have an impact. I mean, the only question is it an impact of consequence or not? And, why do we need to be an experiment to find that out? Shouldn't that be found out some other way? But what's especially disturbing about this is in the GMO testing that happens now, I buy everything, I look for that little label saying, no GMOs, right? These particular foods will not show positive in those labs, will it?
No, it won't, because it's not a genetically modified piece or genome from another species. As a matter of fact, we have the GMO labeling law that is supposed to be in effect in the next couple years. But what Monsanto and all these big corporations are doing is they're trying to make it to where it's very lax, and they can put an 1-800 number on the label, or they can put a QC code on the label and not actually have to say on the label that the product is genetically engineered. And that's exactly what's happened with the Arctic apple, because on their label, on their packaging right now, they do not have an area on the packaging that says this product is genetically engineered. They have a QC code on the label where you're supposed to know as a consumer how to access that information about your food and then determine that it's actually genetically engineered. As a matter of fact, Del Monte, the largest producer of pineapples, was just approved to come out with a pink, luscious, sweet pineapple. And they used the same RNA interference technology to turn off the carotene gene inside the pineapple so it doesn't turn yellow. It actually is going to turn pink. So now they're going to start selling pink pineapples. So what they're going to say, well, you get more lycopene in it. And companies are producing fruits which have higher antioxidants by working with this gene engineering technology. There's been potatoes. There's a hybrid wheat that's scheduled to come on the market in 2022. So we have serious situations that we need to identify and let people know, because this is not in the mainstream news.
Not
and
at all.
people are going and getting this produce, and all of this stuff is being fed to the animals, and especially people that eat meat. I mean, they need to understand that the majority of the livestock are being fed these genetically modified foods, and not only that, eating and consuming high levels of Roundup and herbicides and pesticides that are getting into the meat, and then it's the cycle, the revolving cycle of where did your food come from? How was your food contaminated? You know, if you think about that before you place something in your mouth and you just say, where did this food come from? You know, then you can start thinking and start analyzing back and saying, is it contaminated, is it not? I can guarantee you that if you eat out in any restaurant, you know, aside from certified organic restaurants, and you start asking restaurants, you know, what kind of cookware they use, what kind of oils they use to cook with, what kind of water they wash and cook their vegetables and their stuff in, you're going to find that, look, we've created a society where it's very easy to overeat. There's food everywhere. There's packaged food everywhere. There's plastics in the food supply. Most of the food that you're going to get is going to have genetically modified stuff in it, and it's going to be contaminated with all this stuff. Children are 10 times, 20 times, 30 times more susceptible to these chemicals and to these genetically modified things. Their body is growing. Their stem cells are still producing. So when you take these genetically engineered foods, or you take these genetically modified foods, or you take all these different chemicals that are all mixed in and you introduce those into a child's body, you're just creating havoc, because these poor children are going to be coming down with all kinds of autism. They're going to be coming down with massive allergies. And the body always gives you a sign and a symptom. It's just that we're not ever taught to recognize these signs and symptoms. So what do? We take our children, or we go to the doctor's office. We spend 7 minutes with the doctor. The doctor diagnoses us with some weird thing. We get put on prescription medications and sent home. It's not about what are you eating, what are you drinking, what is your environment like, what are your stress levels that you're dealing with. Stress alone has been, talking about genetically modified foods, they're already a lot harder to digest. When you incorporate a society right now, which we're dealing with, 90% of the people out there suffer from stress at least 3 to 4 times a week, or bouts of stress. What does stress do? It puts you in a sympathetic state.
Right.
You stop digesting your foods. One of the big scenarios is if your body takes 24 hours to digest a meal, and your body, 25% of the energy your body creates every single day goes to digesting one meal, and you're eating 3 or 4 genetically modified meals every single day, then you're going to have to take 4 or 5 days just to digest that. The proteins are going to turn putrefactic. The carbohydrates are going to ferment. The fats are going to turn rancid. Not only do you have all the residues from the genetically modified and the genes that are altering your digestive cells, killing off all your good probiotic in there, but you also have putrefaction. You also have all these other chemicals from the toxic sludge that's sitting in your intestinal lining. All of that combined is just wreaking havoc on the digestive system, and you're utilizing all your energy stores. And when you combine stress into that factor, and you're in a chronic state of stress and sympathetic state, then you can have undigested food in your system for a week at a time, and you're just adding it in and adding it in and adding it in. And that's why some of the new ways to alleviate some of these situations is, number one, just don't eat genetically modified foods and educate yourself about them, and continually educate yourself about some of the new technology that's out there. That's the beauty of the internet. You can type in GMO and you can go under news and you can see all, you know, what's happening in the industry and things like that. And to detoxify your system and to repair your bowel and to cleanse your bowel on a regular basis. And even, you know, pure clean water, a 72-hour water fast will help repair the intestinal tract and the bowel. And that's why, you know, doctors are having so much success by just taking people off genetically modified foods and seeing that it does make a difference.
It's sort of horrifying that we've gotten to this point as a species, that we have to become hyper vigilant just when it comes to eating. I mean, it really shouldn't be this hard, right? I mean, we shouldn't have to have all these considerations. It's because it's what you're saying. It's not even just, okay, what's the source of the food? Now the food comes in. What's it being washed in? What's it being cooked in? I mean, all of those steps along the way all have an influence. And if it's, if it's being cooked in aluminum, if it's being washed with bad water. I mean, all of these things all add up. And I think what a lot of people, at least in the corporate interests that are maybe malevolent in nature, that when they probably count on the fact that the vast majority of human beings aren't going to be that vigilant. They can't be that vigilant. They're working, they're raising kids, they're taking care of a household, et cetera. To add all this hypervigilance onto it is almost insurmountable for most people. And when you look at what it's doing to the environment in the future, et cetera, as you lay this out, and I'm thinking about it, because you also said, so what happens, symptoms start to emerge, you bring the kid to a medical doctor, they do an evaluation, then they send him home with prescription drugs, which is now further perpetuating this cycle of adding additional things, which are probably going to further disrupt the balance of the gut flora, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you see all this, and you see it very clearly. You can tell how it just flows out of you. And then you recognize, my God, how do we try to create solutions, for people that are living in everyday life? So, what do you see? So, if I'm the parent now, or the person who's responsible for a household, what do you think some of the low to the ground, simple solutions are to help get my family to a safe place?
Well, first, you have to recognize what the toxins are, and you have to learn about what you're eating, what you're drinking, what you're breathing. The sad thing that's happened is the earth has actually become the genetically modified organism, and the earth itself is sick. The water supply on the earth is contaminated. The vegetation is contaminated. The earth itself is contaminated and sick, and that we're all one. I mean, we're connected to the earth. Mm-hmm. And as we continue to poison the earth, we continue to poison ourselves. So it's even hard to get the proper nutrients that you need, sometimes even with an organic diet. So the first step, I always say, is education, right? I mean, when we were seeing patients, I would always say, do you know why you have cancer? Do you know why you have diabetes? Do you know why you have heart disease? No, I don't. Are you telling me that all the doctors that you've been to in the last 20 years have never explained to you why you have that disease? And they say no. Well, don't you need to understand why you have something, or what that individual food component or drink component or whatever is doing to you before you understand how to fix it, right? I'm not going to go rewire a house because I'm not an electrician. I'll have to learn about electricity first before I go do that. So step number one to me is always education. Let me explain to you why you have the disease that you have. The reason you have it is because you're taking in 100,000 chemicals and toxins from food every day. You're taking in 100,000 toxins and chemicals from your beverages that you're drinking every day. You're taking in 100,000 toxins from the stress levels that you're under every single day. You're taking in all these chemicals and toxins from the parasites and the microbes that are living in your body that are secreting all these chemicals and toxins. You're taking in all these chemicals and heavy metals. Now that you understand your body can only process, let's say, 1 million chemicals or toxins that are coming in, but you're bringing in 2 million on a daily basis, what do you think happens? Well, the gut is the first thing, then the liver, and then your body doesn't have your elimination routes. Your natural elimination routes are blocked, right? That's another thing that's happened with genetically modified foods, is it blocks your elimination routes. Constipation. Most people should be having 2 bowel movements a day. But when you start putting all that stress and all those chemicals and all those food particles in that are destroying the natural motility of the bowel and burning holes with the Bt toxin through the intestinal lining, and all of these undigested food particles and chemicals are leaking into the bloodstream, what is the body to do? Okay, your natural elimination routes through respiration and sweating, you're not doing enough activity anymore, so that's 50% of your elimination routes blocked or only maybe working 10 or 15%. Then you have urination. Well, people aren't drinking enough pure, clean water, so they're not urinating enough. That elimination route is blocked or not functioning 100%. Defecation is not working. You're not having your 2 bowel movements a day. And then for women who have 5 elimination routes with menses, how many women do you know that are having regular menstrual cycles? So if you take away all of the natural elimination routes, how we eliminate chemicals, how we eliminate toxins from the the body becomes overburdened. It becomes too many chemicals. So what does the body do at that point? This is the root cause of all disease. Whether it's cancer, it starts dumping all these chemicals and toxins in one area and then walls it off. If it's diabetes, it dumps the chemicals and toxins in the pancreas and then the islet of Langerhans. Your cells breathe just like you breathe, and then they become coated with all these chemicals and toxic material, and they ultimately can't function, they can't breathe, they can't reproduce, they can't do all these things. It happens at the cellular level, and that's diabetes. Heart disease, your body just dumps the toxins in the arteries and in the cardiovascular system. Arthritis, your body dumps the toxins in the joints. So it doesn't matter what you're dealing with, it's just a sign that your body has way too many chemicals and toxins coming in, and you're not able to eliminate them fast enough to keep up. And that's when your self-healing mechanism starts going down, that's when your immune system starts to suffer, and that's when you need to really pay attention to what you're dealing with so you can learn how to change your lifestyle, switching over to organic, clean, healthy foods. Even better, putting your own garden in, because you still lose the energetic value. Most of the stuff, even organic, is picked before it's actually ripe, and then it has to travel to your grocery store. But identifying the things, the aspartame, all of the different chemicals in your kitchen that you're going to be exposed to in the foods that you eat, and making that switch away from genetically modified foods, genetically engineered foods, to organic, healthy foods. Changing up the water that you're drinking to pure, clean, organic, healthy water. Reducing your stress levels. Opening up your elimination routes again, paying attention to how much you sweat and breathe through respiration and sweating, paying attention to your urination patterns, paying attention to your digestive patterns, and healing the gut first. I mean, every single thing starts in the gut. Disease starts in the gut, but health also starts in the gut at the same time. And taking some good probiotics, cleaning your gut on a regular basis, and then moving on to the liver and cleaning the parasites and the chemicals and all the metals out of your system, and cleaning all of that accumulated toxic buildup in your system that's bringing you down, that may be causing your stress, that may be causing your depression, your anxiety, you feeling sick and no energy in the afternoons, and just healing your body the natural way it was intended to heal. Thousands of years ago, they didn't have all prescription medication. They didn't have even a lot of herbal technology. The only thing they would do is just put you in the sun and have you drink pure, clean water until your disease went away. And I think we're slowly starting to get back into that, and people are starting to realize that the biggest, deepest, darkest secret the medical profession hopes you never find out is how you can heal yourself without them involved. And you can take responsibility for your own health, and you can heal your own self, and it doesn't take a lot of time and effort to do. It just takes a little bit of education.
Your passion around all this is certainly observable, but it's also contagious. You've got me really excited. But I think what's great is that you've identified the problem, I think, comprehensively, real good macro view and showing, all the different pieces of it. But then also, solutions and potential solutions and some things that maybe provide some hope that we can get past this and get to a healthy place again, although I think the challenges are pretty big. But I do want to say thanks so much for sharing your wisdom, your passion, and bringing it here to GMOs Revealed so that our viewers can get a deeper understanding of what's going on and what they can do about it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I'm always, right along that line of trying to educate and help as many people as we can, and bringing awareness to the dangers of this new GMO 2.0 technology, as well as the dangers of all the chemicals that are sprayed on the current GMOs and the GMOs in the food supply today. So hopefully everybody will be going into their kitchen right now and cleaning out and looking at all their foods and making sure that they don't have any genetically modified foods in their kitchen.
Rest assured, I think that's going to happen. Thanks so much.
Thank you.